This is a story called The Children with No Place to Go. Lucille is a single mum to 4 children. Anna aged 9, Luke aged 7, Lily aged 5 and Mary Ellen aged 3. Lucille constantly invites her friends for wild parties with drugs and alcohol. The kids are constantly abused time and time again, physically, sexually and mentally. They're severely neglected and malnourished. None of them can read or write because they've never been to school. They never tell anyone about what's happening to them because it's been drilled into them not to, because if they do, they'll be killed. One day little Mary Ellen spilled her drink on the floor, causing Lucille to go crazy. She grabbed her and started hitting her over and over again. Anna tried to stop her, but she too was beaten. She was beaten so badly she could barely stand up. As you can imagine, she was terrified. However, that night when they were in bed, Lucille was partying with her friends downstairs and they couldn't get to sleep. Annie went into Luke's room and she said to him, "Luke, we need to grab the others and get out of here now while we can before it's too late. Where are we going to go? We don't know anyone that will take us in. I know, but if we stay here, they'll keep hurting us, so we need to get out of here whilst we can." They all sneaked downstairs and headed for the door. Unfortunately, some of Lucille's guests saw them. Both them and Lucille beat them and they locked them in their rooms. The next day they were kept locked in their rooms. They had no access to food and drink and no access to the toilet. When they were eventually let out of their rooms, little Mary Ellen had wet and messed herself several times, resulting in her being punished. The kids were terrified of Lucille and her friends and they just wanted to get away from them, but they had nowhere to go. One day during a party, Lucille saw blue lights flashing, and when she looked out the window, the police were coming down the street. Luckily for her and her friends, they went straight past. Lucille and her friends continued to have wild parties and to abuse the kids for quite some time. Then one day Lucille went out with her friends, locked the kids in the house with no food and they didn't come back for 4 days. While she was gone, the police had been informed that the house was being used as a drugs den. They came out and broke down the door. When they got in, the kids were all huddled together in a corner, petrified. No one knew that there were kids living there as no one had ever seen them. The social services were contacted and the kids were placed in emergency foster care until their dad could be contacted. In the meantime, Lucille and her friends were missing. However, as soon as they saw their pictures in the paper, they all went on the run. The children were all treated for their wounds and about 2 days after they were rescued, social services managed to locate their dad. When he saw the state of them, he broke down in tears. He had no idea what was happening to his kids because he hadn't seen them since just after Mary Ellen was born. He took them home to live with him. Eventually, the kids' physical wounds healed, but Cal knew that they had a long road ahead of them to overcome their trauma. After 2 months, Lucille and her friends were caught and arrested. They were all kept in prison on remand until their day in court. On their day in court, they all pleaded not guilty to all the charges against them. The case was sent to trial, which lasted for 2 weeks. Thankfully, they were all found guilty of all the charges and they were each sent to prison for 15 years. However, Lucille's parental rights were never terminated and Carl was made to take the kids to see her every month. As you can imagine, they were terrified. They'd scream and cry and beg and plead with Carl not to take them. On the third visit, Lucille punched Annie in the face for no reason. She was rearrested and in court 5 years were added to her sentence. This time the judge terminated her parental rights and he apologised for not doing that in the first place. After the school summer holidays, the kids all started school except for Mary Ellen, who started nursery. It was hard for them because they couldn't read or write. However, during the school holidays, Carl and his fiancée Ivy taught the kids to read and write as best as they could. They were worried that they'd get bullied, but thankfully they didn't. The other kids were really happy to help them and they welcomed them with open arms. It turned out that they were all quite clever, especially Annie. It took quite some time, but with the help of counselling, the kids were able to overcome their ordeal. All 4 of them sailed through school, college and university. Annie became a children's counsellor, Luke became a doctor, Lily became a primary school teacher, and Mary Ellen became a social worker. Whilst in prison, Lucille and her friends beat a woman to death, and they all received a further life sentence each. This meant that they would never be released from prison. Of course, the kids' trauma stayed with them forever, but they never dwelled on it. When they went on to have kids of their own, they vowed never to lay a hand on them, and they never did. They told them a bit of what had happened to them, but not everything, as they didn't want to scare them. They did come together and write a book about their ordeal, which was a total success. The end. Hope you like it, guys. Remember, if you're watching on Facebook, please feel free to like, share, comment, and to go to my YouTube channel and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, please feel free to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, guys. Bye.